Welcome to the Tomorrow is Not Today podcast. You've already started to create the life you want just by being here. Designed for you as a business professional so you can be physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy, more productive, less stressed, and living a life you truly love. My name's Kingsley, and thank you for coming on another journey with one of our uniquely qualified professionals. Welcome to the Tomorrow is Not Today podcast. Very excited to have you along here today with us. Very special guest all the way from, welcome to Tomorrow is Not Today podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Kingsley. And yeah, I having been to Australia and just seeing a little bit of it. I mean, it was mostly in the cities when I was there years ago. But yes, Texas. And at the time I lived in New York, by the way, so I didn't live in Texas back then. But yeah, there's parts of Texas, there's parts of Australia that very, very similar.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I do have to get back there and get to Texas, that's for sure. Everything's big, I hear. Mind you, compared to Australia, everything in America is big. It's just how it is, place. John, tell us a little bit about, you've got quite the, I was going to say sordid background, but that's probably not the best way to put it. You've got quite the, in so many different areas, so many different ways in business and health and a whole bunch of different things. So just give us a bit of a snapshot summary of your life, I guess.
Wow. Well, okay. Well, first of all, I had 4 children. I've got 3. Unfortunately, my one daughter passed away a few years back. Been married 23 years to the same woman, and she's Canadian, I'm American. And as we speak, we're going through this whole crazy tariff thing, and we're not sure what's going to happen. And we got property in Canada and a business in Canada, so and family in Canada for that matter. So who knows? A little bit of craziness happening in the world, but what else is new? But yeah, I've been self-employed for 42 years. I started way back. I was in college. And I was working at a health club. I was selling health club memberships. And I was always involved with sports. Back then I wrestled and played judo, and I did that for a lot of years after that. But a guy who I had competed, not against directly, he was a lot smaller guy than me, but he introduced me to the direct selling field. This was in April of 1983. May of 83, then President Reagan spoke at my college commencement. And he spoke about finding mentors in your life and finding people who would teach you a business that you were interested in. And I all of a sudden realized the last 30 days I was being mentored, for one thing, and I found a business that I liked. So I decided to pursue it. June of 1983, I went to my first actual meeting ever in my life. I never was to anything, besides little tiny meetings of any kind. And I went to my first meeting and got really excited about direct selling, and been doing it now for 42 years. The last 29 years have been with one company, primarily a company that markets a unique product for the human immune system. I like science, as you said, very accurately. I like science. I like evidence-based science. I don't like, this happened for Aunt Tilly. I like to be able to look at stuff under a microscope. I'm not a doctor, but I like to know that doctors look at stuff and verify that, what's being said about, various supplementation is true.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been part of my career. The other part of my career has been in the financial service world. I've always maintained insurance licenses since an early age. I got interested in finance after my very first company had some problems, and I watched my income go from here to here. I'm not exaggerating, Casey, literally overnight. And I was a young guy. I was single at the time. I had no kids, so it didn't affect me. But some of the guys who had families, some of the women who had families, I watched the effect. And I said, you know what? I want to know what's going on financially in the world. So I decided how, better to do that than get into the money business, so to speak, the insurance business. And I've always kind of played around with it, never had a career in that. That wasn't my career path, but I liked it. And I always wanted to maintain a footing in it. If nothing less than understanding the current laws, the current tax laws, the current estate laws here in the United States, for example. So yeah, I've had multiple careers, frankly, over the years. But as far as making a living, it's always been in the direct selling and network marketing space.
Going along that phase a little bit, because I'm the same. Like, I love looking at the science behind things and checking what's happening, what's going on, has it been verified properly. I think it's incredibly important to do that. And obviously having a little bit of that background and then being in business for yourself, obviously we talk a lot about physical and mental health for business owners, entrepreneurs, senior level execs. How did you, I guess, going through those times where the income goes, and I know that fortunately the pressure side of it when you don't have a lot of dependents and responsibilities makes it easier. But when you're young, it also hits you really hard as well because you're invincible then, nothing can go wrong. Usually that's how we think. What did you do to pull yourself out of that? And obviously you went, okay, I'm going to make a plan for the future. How did you get into that thought mode and what did you do about it for yourself?
I focused on myself, on not only my self-development, but my business self-development. I said, no matter what I'm going to do, if I'm going to be working for me, I've got to work on me. My product's got to be me. Doesn't have to be this specific network marketing brand or this specific insurance brand or this specific whatever brand. I worked on my skills, my communication skills, my writing skills, so that I would be able to always articulate a message to someone. So the person on the other side that I was trying to market to, recruit, sell to, that they would clearly understand what it is that my message was. And if they were so, interested after getting that message, that they would correspond and say, hey, raise their hand and say, hey, you know, let's get involved in business together or some of your products. So I really worked on me. Second to that, I also worked on my self-development because I wasn't raised by parents that understood self-development. I hate to say they're both dead now, but they were both good people. They both worked hard, but they were always people who blamed everything on someone else. It was the government's fault, the president's fault, the whatever. And I kind of figured out when I heard the statement that, for things to change, you have to change, or for things to get better, you have to get better. Jim Rohn put those words together many, many years ago. And one of the very first direct selling meetings I went to at Hartford, Connecticut, I heard those words. And I said, well, in other words, it's not the president's fault. It's not the economy's fault. It's not my next door neighbor's fault. It's not my sister's fault. Like, I have a role in what happens, good, bad, or indifferent. And I started reading things like As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, for example. And I realized by reading that little short book, I mean, you read that thing in an hour. If you're a fast reader, you can read in 45 minutes. And I read that book over and over again with the idea that what you attract in life is what you are, not what you want to be, but what you are. And I said, well, if I become a better person, if I become a smarter person, if I become a more educated person, I don't mean formal education, I mean real education, street education. I'm going to attract other people that are so inclined to work with some of the top earners in my industry that have always wound up in my downline and made me money because the people that were high caliber, because I was high caliber. I didn't start out high caliber. I started out knowing nothing, but I worked really, really hard to figure things out. The other part of that self-development wasn't just the reading with James Allen and Dr. Norman Vincent Peale and Jim Rohn and all the other great authors, Earl Nightingale. But the other thing was I became a trial and error type of guy. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. I went into the car business for a very short time in Pennsylvania. I know nothing about cars, which is really funny because my son is a total car guy. He can take an engine apart and put it back together in his sleep. Me, it's like, is it 6-cylinder or 8-cylinder? I do know the difference, but I'm not a car guy. I get in, I turn the key. If it goes, terrific. If it doesn't, I go to one of the other cars and I put a key in it and hope it goes. But I went into the car business because I wanted to try out a sales system that I learned from a guy named Dale Maloney. Dale's deceased now. But I learned this sales system and I said, I have to try it. And I can read about it and I could theorize and I could actually try it. And I did. And I took 19 cars at this dealership in Pennsylvania. I took 19 cars that the owner of the lot, he had 5 different brands of cars he was selling. I said to him, Jim, give me however many cars you want to get rid of this weekend. And give me a budget. Let me do a direct mailing piece. Okay, this was in the days when we actually mailed things before the internet. And I mailed out these letters to all of the businesses within about a 4 or 5 mile radius of this car dealership. And I took the cars and I put them on a hill. There was like a mound. I was able to put the cars facing up this way. So in the direct mail piece, I described these are the vehicles that you're eligible to buy, and they're all heavily discounted. In one weekend, of those 19 cars, I sold 15. No, knowing nothing about cars. Point being, Kingsley, that I had to do it because I couldn't tell somebody else to do something that I was not willing to do myself. Not being a car guy, if they came in and they were asking all kinds of technical stuff, I was like, look, that's the vehicle. Here's the price. It's heavily discounted. It's only this weekend. If you want the car, buy it. Do your own research. Okay. And I did. And point about all of that is, to me, business, whatever business one is in, the only way to do it is to go out and kind of get your nose bloody. It's like sports. You got to get hit in the nose once in a while if you're in a sport, for example, to realize how tough it is or isn't. And to me, business is the same. You don't get beat up physically as much, but sometimes mentally you get beat up even worse. But that's what I did. And that's been everything that I've done since in network marketing, in the financial service world, in the car world for a short time is go out and do it and figure it out and ask questions of other people with more experience and talent, frankly. Don't be shy about asking people questions because successful people will share how to be successful, but they're not going to come to you and volunteer it. You have to pursue them. So that's kind of all I've ever done is trial and error, and then pursue excellence in people who are excellent in a given field and ask them questions and be tenacious, but go to them with, here's what I did versus here's what I'm thinking of doing. In other words, go to them with some practical things that you did that maybe you even failed at. Say, here's what I did. What do you think I could have done differently? And that's, the learning process. And that's why I think I've been, pretty successful in everything I've done is I'm not afraid to do that. And the people I work with know I've done it. I'm not theorizing it. I'm going from application of actually having done it myself.
You've just given sort of a whole masterclass there and a whole range of things. You've got a ton of different things there, which is really, really cool. So I want to drill down on some of those things that you talked about and see if we can go through a bunch of things, not too in depth, obviously, because we don't have quite that long. But the first thing that I think is really important that you said is that you started working on yourself. Now, how did you know you had to work on yourself? Because a lot of people aren't that self-aware. And so what made you realize that you had to work on yourself and start reading books and listen to people like Jim Rohn?
Well, because I realized that I didn't know what I was doing and that I was going to become the brand that the people saw, no matter what great product I was representing, whether it was cars, whether it was insurance, whether it was network marketing, no matter what the brand was, I was the person sitting in your living room across from you. So if I represented myself,
yeah, that is such an important point. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that yet, that no matter what we do, no matter who we are the brand. Whatever company you're working for, you are the brand, you are the person that people are going to work for or work with. I do a lot of work with state industry, and agents don't realize that they are the brand. You might work for a company, you might have a brand name that you're with, but people want to work with people, not companies. And you're starting to see more and more people posting on this in different social media channels at the moment as well. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, but they're talking about the company where it might be, say, Elon Musk following versus Tesla's following, or Jeff Bezos following versus Amazon's following. And people are realizing that you need to build and be the brand. That is such a critical point you just mentioned there.
thank you. But that's what I realized because you just, take real estate, right? So I'm sure in Australia, you have multiple listings like we do here in the United States, right? Which means any realtor, if there's a sign on that house that says for sale, any realtor can show that house from any given company. Why should they buy from you? Because you're the brand, you're knowledgeable. They ask a question, you know the answer. If you don't know the answer, you don't make up the answer. You say, hey, on that one, let me check because maybe there's something specific in that house. Let's just say there's a fireplace. And the person says, well, can I burn this or that in it? You know what? I don't know the answer to that. Let me get back to you. Let me check with the homeowner tomorrow and get back to you rather than making it up. Go, sure, you can burn whatever. I'll make up an example here, but I think being knowledgeable is one thing, but being a know-it-all turns people off. If you're honest with them and say, "Hey, you know what? I think you got me on that one. Let me do my job and let me inquire, and I'll get back to you with that answer because you are obviously interested in this house, so you're not Kingsley, right?" I say, "Yeah, I really like it, John. Okay, great. So let me get back to you on that one. Let's look at the rest of the house, and move them forward." That's something I learned early on was don't get stuck either on something you don't know because that could end the conversation. Like just say, "Hey, on that one, let me get back to you and let's move forward, on the rest of the house or the rest of the car or the rest of the insurance policy or the rest of the pay plan or the rest of something when someone asks me that I don't know." And I think being honest with people is something that we need to be in the selling profession. And if we are with people and we're clear with them and they say, "Hey, this person's honest," once again, we're the brand. So at the end of the day, they're going to say, "Hey, I'm going to buy from that guy because I like that guy or I like that gal or I like that couple." And I think that's ultimately important. But getting back to that, you being the brand, that's what I recognized early on in the early 1980s when I really started my own business was I have to represent me, okay, and I have to represent myself well. Here's another example. I have said one or two swear words in my life, okay, but I will never swear around a possible client or person I'm working in business with. And, and I'm not going to be foul mouthed at home, with your spouse or your kids. Okay. But, if it's something at home, oh, well, so, so be it. For the simple reason, once again, I'm representing myself. Now, I'm not being phony with people, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, I don't know that they're not going to be offended if I used whatever the swear word might be. Okay. I'm not talking vulgar ones. I'm just talking even the basic ones, things like that you learn over the years, of just kind of being really honest, straightforward, and at the same time, very respectful of what our moms taught us, right? The golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated, and here's another one now. This comes to mind. And I learned this in the car business. Never prejudge. This is an amazing thing there. But my dad was a construction guy. My uncles were all construction guys, which means when they went to work, they would come home at the end of the day, normally sweaty and dirty. You're doing construction work. You're outside. So when I was working in that car dealership in Pennsylvania, for those of you who never sold cars, they work on an up system. In other words, somebody comes on the lot. If you're the next person up for a sale, you're the one who walks out and says hello to that person. If they buy a car, you make your commission. The guy behind me, I'm sitting here, and the guy sitting behind me, his name is Jim. He looks at a guy getting out of an old beat up truck and he says, "I don't feel like going out right now. It's kind of hot out." He says, "Hey, you know what? You take him." He said, "Plus, look at the guy." He said, "He's not going to buy a car." I looked at the guy and I saw a guy with work boots, with dirt on his work boots, with dirt on his overalls, getting out of a truck that obviously was being used on a construction site. And at that time, this was in the Pocono Mountains in eastern Pennsylvania. At the time, there's a lot of construction going on. I don't know if there still is, but this is 40 years ago, almost. And I looked at that fella and he reminded me of my dad or my cousins or my uncles that all worked at construction. And I said, "That guy's making money. He's dirty because he's making money. Somebody's paying him to be dirty. You know what I mean? He's not rolling around in the mud. He's dirty because he's working. Somebody's paying him." So I just used my logic, like, the guy's working no different than my relatives all did. And I walked out, I introduced myself. Well, that guy wound up buying 8 trucks from us. He bought a fleet of trucks, all used trucks, by the way. And by the way, in the car business, you make more money on a used vehicle than you do a new vehicle. At least you did then. That may have changed. But the point was, I make this big sale to this guy. And of course, the other guy, he's mad at me because I made the sale. And I said, "Jim, you judged the guy because of the vehicle he got out of." I said, "And why didn't you use your common sense? That man's working for a living. He's dirty because somebody's paying him to get dirty all day because they don't want to get dirty all day. He's obviously, building a house somewhere for somebody. He was a stonemason. Okay, so he did masonry. So he was dealing with concrete and, all kinds of stuff. So, you learn not to prejudge. In my network marketing life, I've had tremendous success with 2 groups of people. One are people who have immigrated to either the United States or Canada, because I've worked all over the world, but primarily I've worked in those 2 markets. And I've had people that have come from countries where they don't speak English well, but they're living in the United States and Canada in places where, English is the primary language. And a lot of times they come from countries that their language is only spoken by a pocket of people So they're laboring with English and they become super successful in my organization, as opposed to some English speaking people who were born and went to school, down the street, and they have every excuse in the world why they're not successful. And secondly, I always had a lot of luck with single mothers, right? Because here's what I recognized from single mothers early on. Once again, the logic, just like the guy getting in the truck dirty. A single mom's probably given up on that image of the guy coming along on the white horse and rescuing her. Most single moms, and statistically 52% of women in America are single moms. They've given up on that notion, which means they know that everything they do is going to be up to them. Raising their kids, taking care of their kids, paying for karate lessons, all that stuff is on them. Not sometimes there's a ex-husband or whatever, but for the most part, they recognize that. So I had a lot of luck working with single moms because I recognized their strength, that they were going to get the thing done, working around school schedules and all the other stuff of being a mom. And this is a true story. My lawyer now, okay, his mom's deceased. His mom was my top distributor in a company that I built in the 80s and the early 90s, okay? He wound up, I've known him since he's a little boy. Now he's a lawyer in Los Angeles now. And I watched him grow up and I watched her raise him. But my point about that is, Kingsley, that I recognized once again the strength of those women and that they would go out and be go-getters in my business. All I needed to do was teach them some basic fundamental stuff about product, pay plan, et cetera, and let them go. They would do the work and the heavy lifting to build their business. They would not be that reliant on me. And frankly, they weren't. And I had 6 of them in one company become multimillionaires.
It's seeing the potential in the person and drawing that out of them. Is it giving them an opportunity because they're already hungry? They know they need to do something and there's an opportunity they're going to grab and run with. What's the most important part, or is it both equal?
It's both probably equal, but I think it's the fact that in the direct selling industry, network marketing, whatever you want to call it, it's a level playing field. Like in the real world, at least here in America, there is prejudice against women. Sometimes a company will pay a man more to do the same job as a woman. And all the legislation in the world isn't going to resolve that. At the end of the day, it's going to be, well, the guy's got a family, pay him a few $1,000s more per year to do the same job. In a direct selling field, if the compensation plan says, hey, we're going to pay out 47%, it doesn't say, but we're going to pay women 45, we're going to pay men 47. That number is a hard set number. So the opportunity is the same for a woman as it is for a man. It's the same opportunity for somebody that comes from a foreign country and relocates as it is somebody who was born, right here in the United States or Canada, for example. So I think that's one of the things I love about the direct selling industry, but also I think it's what people that, and that's not me, I'm obviously a white Anglo-Saxon guy. Okay. I haven't been in that situation. I can't relate to a single mom on a personal level, but I can on a business level because I see what they go through and that they're looking for opportunity and that they're hungry. And in some cases, they're hungrier than, people who have been given all the advantages, in a particular market.
That's quite often the case where people who haven't had everything given to them, they haven't had the opportunities maybe thrust upon them, that actually when there is something there, they do see an opportunity and a possibility to run with. And I think one of the things there is having people see an opportunity that's in front of them, because quite often they don't. And obviously to find those people and give them an opportunity or show them an opportunity that's there for them to run with something is a massive thing. Was that something, do you think, that's in their mindset already? Like looking back over some of the people you worked with, was that in their mindset already? Or is that something you had to work with them and they had to develop themselves?
Great question. I think it was already there. All I did was lit a match and said, hey, you realize what you can do. You realize what you can do for your kid. Okay. Your kid who's a piano prodigy, your kid who could be a good athlete, but they're going to need lessons and coaching. Your kid who maybe on the other end, your kid who maybe is challenged academically, where you're going to need to get some extra tutoring for them. It all costs money. So all you do is set the match, so to speak, with those people and say, look, let me you know, let me show you a way, and then let me fire you up on that way, not with hype, but with some basic fundamental things that you can do in your business, and then let them go, and then be there to tweak things along the way. When they come back and they say, I did this, I did that, I'm making this much money, but I really need to make this much money. How do I get there? That was always my job, to kind of coach them on, okay, here's what we can do. You're making this much to go to here. You're talking to 5 people a day. You need to talk to 10, or you need to talk to 15, and you need to do this. And like I was there, more than anything else for those people. But a lot of times I just got out of the way. let the free enterprise take place, and let the hunger. And, I think it was Napoleon Hill said in Think and Grow Rich, right? About the burning desire that people have. If they have a burning desire, you can teach them all day. You don't need to teach them anything. Really, you just need to guide them. Okay. If somebody has a burning desire, somebody who doesn't have a burning desire, hey, teach them all day, teach them to glue in the face. You can teach them everything you've learned for 42 years, and they can take notes on it. And it really doesn't matter, because they're not going to apply any of it if they don't have that burning desire to go out and succeed. And by the way, I haven't seen, just single moms who just immigrants. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people that look like you and I do, that have been successful too. That one element of that burning desire in all of those human beings, that burning desire has been the one thing I would say they all have in common, is they have that burning desire to succeed, and they go out and they work their butts off at it, because that's the other part of it. There's nothing easy in business. Anybody who tells you any business is easy is lying to you. So, but is it worth? Yeah, absolutely. It's worth it. I mean, the financial merits alone are worth it. Okay. But also what it teaches us in the respect that we know we can stand on our own 2 feet, no matter what circumstance comes our way. Sometimes that circumstance is not a business circumstance. Sometimes it's a life circumstance, right? Let me give you one from my own life here. Not my proudest moment, but my daughter doesn't mind that I share this, and I share this with people sometimes for a good reason. My oldest daughter, who I adopted, my wife's biological daughter, who I adopted when she was a little girl, she got herself involved with some drugs and bad, and almost died. So we put her in rehab for 30 days. And at the end of the rehab session, we picked her up, and she looks at me and she says, "Dad," and I'm her dad. I mean, this biological father nowhere in sight. I raised her, and she looks at me, she says, "Dad, I know what you're going to say. I have no idea what I'm going to say." I'm like, "Okay, well, what am I going to say, Kimmy?" She says, "Day at a time, brick at a time, process by process is how I'm going to beat this drug addiction." You thought, first you want to cry, and then you break out in a cold sweat. You realize my mentor used that in my network marketing career. I picked up that expression. I probably repeated it 1,000 times in my house here, on calls, on conference calls, on Zoom calls, on all sorts of things. She's watched me speak in different places, and all of a sudden, something a whole lot more serious than building a business happens in her life. And she says from her self-development that I shared with her, right? Brick by brick, process by process, day by day is how I'm going to beat this thing. And she has, by the way. She stayed clean, and she's doing great, and she's working, she's clean, she's healthy, thank the good Lord. So sometimes what we do is more important for our families than just making a living and giving them all the great economic opportunities that come with it. Sometimes it's what they learn that they apply in their lives that we indirectly have given them because of our careers. So, we have important jobs to do.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. It doesn't matter whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether on a sports team, whatever it is, what we live and what we say ourselves, it is picked up and it is repeated, whether it's by our staff, by our kids, by our fellow team members, whatever it is. And I think sometimes we don't give enough credence to the fact of how what we do affects people. Like John Maxwell, as I'm sure you very well aware, his thing is leadership as influence. And you don't need to be the boss to be the influencer, because people watch whether they're above, beside, below, whatever. People always watching and always picking up on things. And it's so incredibly important. I've had that same thing happen with my kids as well, both the good and the bad, where you're like, I remember saying to one of my kids when she was 3, my eldest, I'm like, who did you hear say that? And she's like, you. And I'm like, I did, didn't I? And I didn't even realize I was saying something, and she picked up on it. And that slapped me when that happened. It's like, I need to watch what I'm doing and what I'm saying, because it's right there. Such an important point.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me give you one other quick tidbit of success. I was working with a company here in Dallas. This is how I got to Dallas now. Wow. 30 years this year. When I came down here, and I came down here to help a friend of mine who had a direct selling company. And I wasn't a distributor with that company. He brought me in to be an advisor and put together some of the marketing for it. And one day, a guy named Rohn walks in my office and he says, would you like to have lunch with Jim? And I'm like, you're Jim. I mean, we're in direct selling. There's 500 guys named Jim. Jim who? He's like, Jim Rohn. Let me check my calendar. It's the only time I ever met Jim. I did meet Jim Rohn periodically, shake hands and stuff. But I mean, it's the only time I ever really got to sit down and break bread with him. And here's something for your listeners, Kingsley, that I hope they really hear me on. We're sitting there at lunch, myself, the owner of the company that I was doing this business with, and this other gentleman who had actually worked for Jim as a ghostwriter. And we're sitting there having lunch. And these two guys are 20 plus years older than me. One's still alive, the other passed away. And I was about 35 maybe at the time. And we finished lunch. And Jim looks across the table and he says, he points at me. He's got his glasses up on his head like he always had, right? If you ever see him, he always wore his glasses up here. And he says, these two guys, maybe it's too late for, but for you, I still have hope, Mr. Solleder. He always called you Mr., by the way, in your last name, Mr. Solleder. And I said, okay, I know exactly what he's saying. Nobody's taking notes. I ran to my car. You would have thought I was Usain Bolt running in my car. I ran to my car. I got my day timer, what I call a day timer, right? People call it a journal. Jim called it a journal. I always call it a day timer, but same thing. I bring it back in. I start to make some copious notes on everything that's said. He said, John, hang on a minute. The reason I told you that is, what if this waiter who's taking care of us comes over and he says something so prolific, and you go home tonight and you say, wow, what that waiter said was prolific. And you come tomorrow and the waiter quit and nobody knows where he is. Or better yet, you come tomorrow and you say to the waiter, hey, yesterday you said something, and the guy looks at you and says, I don't remember what I said. But when he says it, it becomes yours. And if you put it in your journal, it's yours forever. And I was like, that's why Jim Rohn was Jim Rohn. It shows me, he had his journal there, by the way. He showed me his journal, which was one of hundreds of journals that he had over the years. He shows me his journal, newspaper clippings. This is pre-internet, by the way. Some newspaper clippings, things he wrote down that other people said, things he probably heard on the news, all the miscellaneous stuff that he took in, thousands of little notes and clips. That's how he became the best at what he did. You look at his Tony Robbins and on, countless others, famous and the infamous for that matter. I mean, everybody has a Jim Rohn quote. They may not know it was Jim Rohn that said it, but chances are.
Those lines, I remember listening to Ziglar when he was around as well, and saying that he would study, I'm pretty sure it was 2 hours a day. It was either 2 or 3 hours a day he would spend in reading and research. But the same thing, they're both sort of up at the pinnacle of the self-development industry around the same sort of time frame. But it's interesting, I didn't realize that Jim Rohn was quite prolific like that as well. So it just goes to show what it takes, doesn't it?
Well, Zig, I'll tell you my Zig experience. Okay. Zig was here in Dallas. He's lived in Dallas most of his life. He's from, I think, Mississippi originally. And the gym I was working out at when I first moved to Dallas, there was a hair salon next door. So one Saturday morning, I look out there and I see this Cadillac pull up. I see this guy get out of the car, go around, open the door for his wife. I see this very well manicured, middle-aged woman with red hair get out of the car. It's the red. Well, that's Ziglar. Okay. And remember, this is all pre-internet where you didn't see these people all the time. You saw them at events. You saw their picture in their books, but you didn't see them like we do today where, they're all over the place. It takes her by the elbow, walks her into the hair salon, goes to get back in the car. Well, I run out of the gym. I'm like, Mr. Zig, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm going back to my home until my wife's done with her hair salon. I said, well, what else are you doing? He goes, well, I need a cup of coffee. I said, well, we have coffee in here. So I'm dragging Zig Ziglar literally into the gym. and we had a nice couch in there. So I'm like, look, well, I'll get you coffee. I got him a cup of coffee. And I said, do you mind if we sit down and talk? Sure. Why not? He says, I was only going to get coffee and go home. He says, but I can, he says, I'm going to kill an hour and a half anyway. He says, I'll talk to you. So myself and two other guys, we sat with Zig and we just talked about business, sales, religion, philosophy. I mean, we covered it all. I mean, there wasn't many subjects we didn't cover. And then he looked at his watch and he said, well, she's just about done, gentlemen. Got up, shook our hands, and left. And I was like, the guy was as real as if you were paying him lots and lots of money to stand in front of, 10,000 of your best salespeople. He was just as real, just as honest, just as direct, just as knowledgeable. Yeah. But here's the other part of that. He didn't know we were watching him take his wife out of the car. He was a gentleman with his wife always, loved his wife dearly. But in other words, he was just as real when the camera wasn't rolling. He was just as much a gentleman then as when the lights were on and he was on. And some of these guys aren't, honestly. I've met some that went like, wow, they turn the camera off and they're two different people. They're Jekyll and Hyde. He and Jim, for that matter, were just as real and just as honest, off camera as they were on camera, and our world needs more Zigs and more Jims, frankly.
It's interesting you say that, because when you look at like Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar, and you look at them, and they were right up until the very, very end. They didn't stop doing what they were doing and stop being the people who they were. And it just went all the way through. Yet often you look now and there's people come and go all the time. And it seems a big difference. And maybe you just hit on something there with the just being the real normal people wherever they were, happy to help. They actually lived the life that they talked about all the way through.
Yeah, both gentlemen. And I think the other part of that was both of those guys really felt, both of them were men, both very religious men. And I think both of them felt like they were really helping people. So to your point, yeah, both of them, until they got sick at the end, until the end of their lives, they basically did what they did because they were like, hey, the message I'm giving is important. It's relevant. It's not just getting a commission check for showing up and selling merchandise and all of that. Sure, they're businessmen. At the end of the day, there's an outcome to all of that. But at the end of the day, I think both of them, really felt like, hey, I'm helping people, in a big way, and that they need to hear my message because it's going to help them to, do better in their life, take better care of their family, and, do all the other things that successful people can do for their community.
Is, I guess, on what you just said, it's being rewarded for giving service to people, isn't it? What they're doing. They're just giving service to people all the time, and a lot of value. And I often think back to what I've learned from those guys over the years. And I can't think of anything that is not still 100% relevant today of anything that they said.
John Maxwell's another guy. I mean, he's still going strong, by the way. He's in a seminar in Florida. Some people I know were at about 2 weeks ago. So John's still going strong, and he's up there in years too now. But these guys, they have incredible messages. Brian Tracy's still going strong. I mean, there's a few of the others. Doug Weed I met one time. Doug Weed was a great guy. He was an Amway distributor, and then he wrote a lot of books, not about the presidents of the United States, but about the children of the presidents of the United States. Fascinating, great speaker. But he said something. Doug said something that stayed with me for years. And I use this sometimes when there's arguments within my business, not necessarily arguments, but people not hearing each other. He was quoting Solomon, accurate communication allows progress. I think about that for a minute, right? Accurate communication allows progress. If we don't accurately communicate with one another, we can't go forward because we think the other person said this, or we think the other person meant that. Whereas if somebody says, look, this item is $199, but we discounted on Tuesday to $179, and that's the best deal you're going to get. And then the consumer says, okay, I guess I'll buy it on Tuesday because it's $179. They know they can't get it for $159. I'm just making up an example here, but that clearness of message, Ronald Reagan understood that. Reagan was such an amazing communicator. Winston Churchill, even though he didn't have the gift of pronunciation, the way that somebody like Reagan had, for example, he was clear in his messaging at a time where people needed strength and in a message. He was very clear in the messaging. So I heard Doug say that, and a lot of people don't know who Doug was, but he was a heck of a speaker and wrote some great books. I've got a number of his books, but these people, all this information's out there, Kingsley, as you well know, and I well know, it's all out there. It's just a case of, turn off the soap operas on TV and listen to podcasts like what you're putting together here and read some of the things of some of these people that have been written and continue to educate yourself, and like I said, I learned that all those years ago, and I'm still, 15 minutes in the morning before I do anything. I get up, I say my prayers, and it's like 15 minutes. I'm cracking a book. I'm reading something. I'm doing, like, for example, right now, I'm actually interviewing different authors on my YouTube channel. I started a thing called Ink and Insight on Wednesdays. I just watched the first one last Wednesday. So I'm taking 4 or 5 years of books of live authors. Sylvester Stallone. The chapter I'm releasing this week is on Mary Kay Ash. Next week is Ode Mandino. Then Abe Lincoln. Fascinating people. All in their own right. And the guy wrote these particular stories about them based on the history of those people. I'm interviewing him. And so it's like I'm always reading what I'm going to interview somebody on or talk to somebody on, but also what I'm interested in. And 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be 3 hours. Take 15 minutes and just kind of fill the brain.
Yeah, exactly. It makes a massive, massive difference. And one of the things I've discovered as well by learning things, whether it's reading, leading to podcasts or whatever, that quite often and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, you get into business and you can get stuck in a rut, or you get where you're not pushing through, you're not making things happen, and you can feel like giving up, or you can feel like it's not working, nothing's happening, and you lose all your motivation and inspiration. And just by learning a new thing, it's like, bang, I've got something, I can go, and you're ready to go again. And so doing that, what you're doing, and hearing other people's stories like that is fantastic. That'll make a massive difference for people.
Well, I just finished reading about Walt Disney, for example. And I did not know, and I've been at Disney like, I don't know, 20 times in my life, right? In between Florida and California. I didn't know all the starts and stops that he had. I mean, I knew it wasn't easy what he did, but boy, you read his life story and you're like, wow. I mean, lost all his money a couple of different times. One of the things happened with him, how he came up with Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse was actually, he had gotten so broke that he was eating canned beans every night. He was single at the time. He's eating canned beans. He's living in what they call a flop house, like just a rented room somewhere. And every night when the can would get empty, this little mouse would come along and eat the balance of whatever was in the can. So he's like, I'm going to call this mouse Mortimer. Well, all of a sudden, Mortimer had become friends. He goes, wow, this mouse is kind of interesting. Well, Mortimer eventually becomes Mickey Mouse. Wow, the money is Mickey Mouse generated over the years. I don't know, billions, I'm sure, right? So he took a negative and he turned it into a positive. Instead of seeing it like, let me squish this mouse and kill it. Well, hey, the mouse needs to eat too. He's not bothering me. I got my food. He can have the balance. And all of a sudden, it gives him a great idea.
Back at people where we look at Disney and what it is and what he accomplished and everything else. And when you're not, when you're happening and getting moving and things, and you don't realize that they had their chapter 1 of their book when they were just starting what's going on. And then chapter 2, it all collapses. And then chapter 3 kicks off again and has another go. And everyone goes through exactly the same phases to a degree. I love that, and just learning from people like that.
And they don't give up. Those people don't, they got such fortitude. The people we never heard of were the ones that gave up. The ones that stuck with whatever it is, whatever their passion was. We know their names because, thankfully they stayed the course.
A whole other topic, which is a really good one as well. But unfortunately, John, our time is actually up. I thank you so much for today. And what a lot of people don't realize is before we actually got on here, you were very, very patient while we got all the technical stuff sorted out. So I really appreciate that as well. When I end the podcast, I always got a couple of questions because I have to talk about tomorrow is not today. We talk about the ultimate tomorrow. I want to ask you, John, what is the ultimate tomorrow?
The ultimate tomorrow, for me is to help as many people as I possibly can before I close my eyes the last time. I feel like, when much is given, much is expected. And I've been given so many gifts in my life, all the great people we talk about and ones we don't even have time to talk about that I learned things from. Some that I knew, Jim I met, Zig I met John Maxwell a few times and others that I never met that were either dead long before my time. But I feel like I've been given a gift. So I want to give that gift back as much as I possibly can to help mankind and womankind, by the way. Help as many people as I possibly can, because I think that's why we're put on this earth, is to do good.
John, how can people, based on what you've just said there, how can either you or other people that are listening create their ultimate tomorrow?
I think once again, it goes back to a couple of things. Number one is the self-development. Realize that you are the brand. Work on you. Okay. Remember, when I point a finger, what normally happens, I point my finger, there's four fingers coming back at me. Okay. Which means the ultimate responsibility is mine. Secondly, attitude. Whoever created the English language did something really smart that we don't even realize. And we won't do this for the sake of time, but I'll give a fast example. If you take the word attitude and you said, A is a 1, right? It's first letter in the alphabet. The T is a 20. The next T is a 20. The next I is 9. The next T is 20, et cetera, et cetera. And if you do that, and you go through there and you say, okay, let me take each letter of the word attitude and what number of that is that in the alphabet? And then you add it up at the end, you're going to get 100%. So our attitude determines everything that happens in our life. I've met people, like, as I described earlier, I've met people with incredibly good attitudes. No matter what happens, they just go through it. And I've met other people and it's like they stub their toe and it's like they're ready to quit. You're like, did you tell me yesterday you have kids and you want to go to college, or you have bills to pay, or you have an elderly parent that needs care or whatever? I mean, because we all need money, you know what I mean? We all need some level of success in our lives to take care of our obligations. So once again, your attitude, like I said, and I don't have time for people with bad attitudes, to be honest with you. Somebody's got a bad attitude, I don't give them much time. They have a good attitude, I'll work with them no matter how untalented they think they are. They can learn the skills. Skills can be learned. If you knew me in 1983, you'd be like, how the heck is this guy ever going to be successful? Sometimes I wonder that it's a result of a lot of hard work.
It is. That's what I love about life. No matter who we are, where we're at, if you've got that opportunity and we take it, we can create that life you want. That's what we're all about. And you've obviously done that, John. Thank you so much for being part of the our podcast here. It's been a pleasure having you on. And just like I said earlier, a masterclass in the overall bird's eye view of business is what you've given us today. And I really, really appreciate it. Have a fantastic day.
I appreciate the invitation and thank you so much.
Remember, create the life that you want.
How about now? Yes, fine. So
Speak. This one?
iPhone, Microphone.
No.
Hello?
Wait, I have no idea.
Well, you want to go to this maybe? Small, sir.
It is. Well, it's because he can't hear you. So the mic is this one. Can you hear you now?
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry, go on. How about now?
Just a minute. What about now?
No?
I don't enter those words. How about now? When he's on mute, okay, now he's good.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Whoa, we were finals. Look. It must be on his end.
Internal.
Person's in just started using these.
Internal. It's a default. What's it? That's all we got. Sits.
What about the headset?
No, forget it.
I might get it. All the headset. Over there so we can see each other.
Because he's not on mute. And you can see us. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I can see the smile. Yeah. These scripts good. The full puns. I think it's on his end. Well, it's over it all. I was trying to sing happened to me. Maybe unplugged. Oh, you can't hear it. It's 8,000 miles. No, it was happened to me, and then I unplugged my headset and I could hear.
Yeah, nothing's plugged in, just a camera.
No, I mean, but I was interviewing somebody and I unplugged and I could hear them. Maybe unplug. No, too.
The volume may appear. Would you hear him at first? The other one?
Yeah, fine, yeah, we're talking. Now I've been to Brisbane twice before. The Gold Coast, beautiful place. We was 3 minutes from the ocean, so. Cool.
There's nothing else. It's all built in.
That meant this one?
Yep. We get phone.
No. Well, okay, disconnect. Okay. Better.
Yeah, it does something else.
Maybe disconnect the headset. How about now?
Well, we should hear him though.
Roll.
There's like nothing walking.
There's nothing on this side. Send him an email, so you disconnect the microphone then.
Well, it's. I do not.
Hey,
You can hear me.
so I had the same thing happen a couple of weeks ago. I have a headset. I've got the microphone. I got all the stuff. I couldn't hear the guy, and then I unplugged it. I was like, "We're fine." So,
Yeah. It's hello. Can you hear me now?
now you're fine.
You can still hear?
So whatever you did worked.
Okay. So
Hear each other? You good?
okay.
Nice meeting.
Is that sound good quality, or is it pretty average?
Let's go. Fine.
Okay. So for some reason your sound isn't coming through here, but that's okay. Let's just run with it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I just want to make sure that it's actually recording properly. So I'm going to stop that.